What happens when 92,000 barrels of bourbon catch fire at the same time? In 1996, Heaven Hill found out. And welcome to Whistory, where I explore the rich and colorful heritage of your favorite beverage. I'm your Professor Bourbon Barry, and do I have a story for you. November 7th, 1996 started like any other Thursday at Heaven Hill in Bardstown, Kentucky. It was unusually warm for November, close to 80 degrees. People were going about their normal workday, making whiskey, filling barrels, moving cases. But off in the distance, the weather was beginning to change. A cold front was moving across central Kentucky. The sky grew dark, the wind began to howl. A violent storm was coming. And just before 2 o'clock that afternoon, someone spotted smoke coming from Warehouse I. Distillery supervisor Charlie Downs drove up the hill to see what was happening. And one look was enough. An immediate evacuation was ordered. A lightning strike is suspected of starting the fire, but it was the wind that turned a warehouse fire into something almost unimaginable. Gusts reached around 70 miles per hour. Flames leapt from one rickhouse to another, and then the barrel started exploding. What followed must have looked like a scene from hell. Flames towered as high as 350 feet above the burning rickhouses as burning whiskey came pouring down the hill. It spilled into Rowan's Creek, turning the water into a river of fire. The creek overflowed, carrying flaming bourbon across the highway with heat intense enough to melt the asphalt. And with the wind still howling, there was almost nothing anyone could do but watch. By evening, the scale of the destruction was staggering. The original Heaven Hill Distillery and 7 rickhouses were gone. 92,000 barrels of whiskey gone. About $30 million in damage. And somehow, through all of that destruction, not a single person was killed. But when the sun came up the next morning, Heaven Hill faced another problem. Heaven Hill was still in the whiskey business. They just didn't have a distillery. And this is where the story takes a remarkable turn. Heaven Hill's competitors stepped forward. Not to take advantage of what had happened, to ask how they could help. Jim Beam and Brown Foreman stepped in to help produce Heaven Hill's whiskey using Heaven Hill's mash bills and specifications. Other distilleries offered storage and helped replace lost inventory. Craig Beam later summed up what had happened in 6 words. Everybody chipped in the next day. Think about that. These companies fought for the same customers, the same shelf space, the same whiskey drinker's dollar. But when one of their own was in trouble, they stopped acting like competitors, and they started acting like neighbors. And Heaven Hill did something pretty remarkable on its own. The very next day, its employees went back to work. Not one of them lost a job. And buried within this story of almost unimaginable destruction is one wonderful little detail. The fire destroyed the distillery. It destroyed 7 rickhouses. It destroyed 92,000 barrels of whiskey. But it didn't get the yeast. Heaven Hill's proprietary yeast descended from the strain used to make its first whiskey back in 1935, had survived safely inside a 5th-floor refrigerator. The buildings could be rebuilt, the whiskey could be made again. And 3 years later, Heaven Hill purchased the Bernheim Distillery in Louisville and finally had a distillery of its own again. Sometimes tragedy has a way of bringing out the best in people. The Heaven Hill fire is remembered for 92,000 barrels of burning bourbon, exploding rickhouses, and a river of fire running through Bardstown. But I don't think that's the best part of this story. I think it's what happened the next morning, when an industry full of competitors saw one of their own lying wounded and decided to lend a helping hand. I bet you thought history was never this much fun in school. I'm Professor Bourbon Barry, and thanks for watching.